The wind howled like a ravenous specter around the isolated cabin, each gust rattling the weathered wooden walls as if trying to rip out their deepest secrets. Inside, the fireplace crackled timidly, casting dancing shadows that transformed familiar objects into grotesque shapes. Liam, a writer seeking the inspiring solitude of the Canadian mountains, tried to focus on the pages before him, but an inexplicable chill crawled down his spine, pulling his attention toward the dark exterior. The night swallowed the landscape in an impenetrable blackness, where every sound was amplified by the oppressive stillness, turning the snap of a branch into the stealthy steps of an unseen intruder. For a fleeting moment, he wondered if the local legend about strange howls echoing through the mountains on moonless nights was just a tall tale. If you're new here and enjoy stories that make you question reality, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Your interaction is vital as we continue to explore these mysteries together. The next morning, the faint light filtering through the window revealed a landscape blanketed in untouched white. Liam sighed in relief, glad to have encountered nothing but snow and silence through the night. However, as he stepped outside to fetch firewood, his eyes widened at a disturbing discovery. Tracked strange markings in the fresh snow, unlike any animal prints he had ever seen. They were large, with 3 elongated toes and deep claw marks, as if something heavy and unnaturally shaped had passed by. Fear, cold and cutting like the mountain wind, began to take hold of his chest. He followed the prints for a few meters, curiosity wrestling with growing dread. The tracks snaked through the snow toward the dense forest surrounding the cabin, vanishing into the dark, towering trees. Liam hesitated at the edge of the woods. The silence there felt even heavier, laden with a sinister anticipation. An unsettling sensation overcame him, the feeling that he was not alone, that unseen eyes were watching from the shadows between the trees. He slowly stepped back, the image of the abnormal footprints etched into his mind. That afternoon, the forest ranger, a burly man with a sun-weathered face named Jasper, arrived for a routine visit. Liam, trying to mask his unease, mentioned the tracks he had found. Jasper listened carefully, his initially calm expression darkening at the description. He confirmed that the prints didn't match any known animal in the region. Not even bears or wolves left marks like those. Jasper shared old stories, whispered among the elder locals, about occasional sightings of an elusive creature, something they called the Snow Wanderer, a shadow that moved silently through the forest. As the days faded into increasingly longer nights, the strange noises returned. They weren't howls, but dry cracks, like branches snapping under an invisible weight, and sometimes a dragging sound, as if something was being pulled through the snow. Liam tried to rationalize it, blaming the wind or unfamiliar wildlife, but the image of those bizarre prints lingered, fueling his growing anxiety. One night, as snow whirled outside in a hypnotic frenzy, he heard a soft scratch at the front door, followed by a sepulchral silence more disturbing than the sound itself. Paralyzed with fear, Liam held his breath, his heart pounding against his ribs. He cautiously peeked through the peephole, but the darkness outside revealed nothing. The silence stretched on for long minutes, making him question whether he had imagined the sound. Slowly, hesitantly, he stepped away from the door, but just a few steps in, a dull thud echoed from outside, as if something heavy had hurled itself against the cabin. Fear gripped him once more, his eyes locked on the trembling door, waiting for the wood to give way beneath some unseen force. What or who was out there, and what did it want with him? The answer, he feared, might be more terrifying than any nightmare his mind could conjure. The thud against the door echoed through the silent cabin, reverberating in Liam's chest like a dark omen. He stood frozen, muscles tense, every sense heightened as he strained to catch any other sound that might reveal the nature of the threat outside. The silence that followed was even more oppressive, charged with a tangible anticipation, as if the forest itself were holding its breath, waiting for the next move. Slowly, with extreme caution, Liam crept toward the nearest window, gently pulling back the dusty curtain. The snow continued to fall, forming a white, blurry veil that obscured the landscape, making it impossible to distinguish any clear shape. The only visible thing was the steady accumulation of snow against the door. No fresh tracks, no new signs aside from the strange footprints he had discovered that morning. Doubt began to erode his initial fear. Had it just been the strong wind? A fallen branch? Was his imagination, vivid and prone to conjuring dark scenarios, playing tricks on him? He wanted to believe that. He longed for a logical explanation to dispel the growing terror that clung to him. But the vivid memory of those strange tracks in the fresh snow lingered, defying any attempt at rationalization. That night, sleep proved elusive. Every creak of the cabin's wood, every whisper of the wind outside, was interpreted by his exhausted mind as the approach of something unknown. He got up multiple times, pacing the small space of the cabin, peeking through the windows. Jasper's shotgun, loaned to him for safety, clutched tightly in his trembling hands. The weapon gave him a small sense of protection, but against what exactly? A legendary creature? Or something even more sinister and unexplainable? The next day dawned with a gray, heavy sky, hinting at more snowfall. Liam decided he needed answers. Pushing aside his lingering fear, he bundled up in his warmest clothes and left the cabin, determined to follow the tracks as far as they would take him. The trail was patchy, at times covered by new snow, but he could still make out the strange markings, guiding him deeper into the dense forest. The vegetation grew thicker, tall pines blocking what little light filtered through, creating a damp and shadowy environment. After an hour of tense walking, the tracks led him to a small clearing. In the center stood an old, twisted tree, its branches like skeletal arms reaching toward the sky. And there, at the base of the tree, the tracks ended abruptly, as if the creature had simply vanished. There were no outgoing footprints, no sign of where it might have gone. Liam carefully examined the area, searching for any clue, any detail that could explain the sudden disappearance. That's when he noticed something strange on the bark of the tree. Deep scratches, vertical marks that looked like they'd been made by powerful claws. And above those marks, carved crudely into the wood, was a symbol, an imperfect spiral, roughly etched, but unmistakable. Liam had never seen anything like it. A chill ran down his spine again, this time accompanied by a far more unsettling sensation, that he hadn't just been following a creature, he was being led somewhere. Where would these symbols lead? And what did that ominous pattern carved into the lone tree in the heart of the forest mean? He sensed the answer was drawing closer, and with each step, the fear inside him grew more intense and undeniable. The symbol carved into the tree seemed to pulse with a sinister energy, holding Liam's gaze. He traced the imperfect spiral with his gloved fingers, the wood rough and cold under his touch. A strange feeling overtook him, a mix of vague familiarity and a dark premonition, as if the mark echoed something long dormant in his own memory. He tried to recall if he had seen anything like it in a book, in a legend, but nothing came to mind. The mystery deepened, wrapping him in a web of unanswered questions. Who or what had made those marks, and why stop there in the center of the isolated clearing? As he examined the tree more closely, his eyes caught something unusual among the exposed roots. A small shiny object, partially hidden beneath the melting snow. Liam knelt and carefully unearthed it. It was a pendant, made of a dark, polished metal, with the same spiral symbol engraved on its surface. The pendant was cold to the touch, but seemed to radiate a strange, almost imperceptible vibration. A chill ran down Liam's spine. That object didn't seem to belong to the forest. It was something manufactured, perhaps lost by someone. But who would be out there, so isolated, to the point of losing a pendant with such a peculiar symbol? Liam put the pendant in his pocket, a new wave of apprehension washing over him. The presence of that human object made the situation even more enigmatic and disturbing. This wasn't just a wild creature leaving traces. There was something more, something possibly connected to a human presence, yet shrouded in a sinister mystery. He looked around the clearing, the feeling of being watched returning with full force. The trees seemed to close ranks around him, their elongated shadows dancing menacingly under the heavy sky. Determined to find Jasper and show him the pendant, Liam began retracing his steps, his own trail of footprints the only guide through the silent forest. On the way back, he noticed something he had missed before. Small patches of dark fur stuck to some low branches. The fur was coarse and thick, different from any common animal in the region. He collected some, storing it in a small envelope he had in his pocket. Each new discovery only deepened the mystery, weaving a tapestry of disturbing questions with no clear answers. When he arrived at the cabin, exhausted and with his mind boiling with unsettling theories, Liam found a note pinned to the door. The handwriting was hesitant and uneven, and the words, written in pencil, were even more disturbing. "Don't follow the tracks. The wanderer doesn't like to be disturbed." A cold fear gripped Liam's heart. Who had left that note? Jasper? Or someone else? Someone who knew the creature's nature and the danger of curiosity. The message was clear. He was meddling in something that should remain hidden. Ignoring the ominous warning, Liam's determination to uncover the mystery only intensified. He had to know what was happening in that remote forest, what the creature truly was, and who else knew its secrets. That night, as darkness swallowed the landscape and strange noises resumed around the cabin, Liam felt a different presence. Stronger, closer. A dark shadow moved briefly beyond the window, too fast to identify, but enough to freeze his blood. He gripped the shotgun tightly, the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in the night's silence. The wanderer knew he was there, and now, Liam knew he wasn't alone in his search for the truth. The confrontation seemed inevitable. The fleeting shadow beyond the window put Liam on high alert. He moved silently through the cabin, extinguishing the lantern so as not to offer an easy target in the dark. Only the faint moonlight, filtering through the cracks in the wooden walls, lit the interior of the cabin in a spectral glow. Every sound outside was amplified by his tension. The rustling of leaves, the snap of a branch, everything sounded like stealthy footsteps approaching. He knew he couldn't simply wait. He had to take the initiative, to discover what was lurking in the darkness before it was too late. With the shotgun firmly in hand, Liam carefully opened the door and peeked outside. The snow had stopped, and the full moon cast a pale glow over the landscape, revealing a scene of elongated shadows and indistinct forms. There was nothing in sight, only the vast white silence of the forest. He hesitated for a moment, debating whether he should venture out. The note had warned him not to follow the tracks, but his curiosity and the need to understand what was happening outweighed his fear. Determined, Liam stepped out of the cabin, his footsteps breaking the silence of the night. He followed the direction in which he had seen the shadow move, staying alert for any sign, any noise that might indicate the creature's presence. The temperature was freezing, and his breath formed clouds of vapor in front of his face. The forest seemed to be watching him, each tree a silent sentinel guarding its secrets. Suddenly, a sharp and distant sound cut through the silence, a guttural wail that echoed through the mountains, freezing Liam's blood in his veins. It wasn't any animal sound he recognized. The wail repeated, now closer, and Liam could feel a subtle vibration in the air. He stopped, trying to pinpoint the origin of the sound, all his senses on high alert. That's when he saw it. Moving between the trees, a dark and misshapen figure, much larger than any regional animal. Its movements were swift and silent, gliding over the snow with surprising agility. The moonlight briefly revealed a glimpse of its silhouette, tall, slender, with what appeared to be horns or bony protrusions on its head. A primal fear paralyzed him for a moment, his mind struggling to process what his eyes were seeing. It wasn't a bear, it wasn't a wolf. It was something else, something out of a nightmare. The creature stopped, as if sensing his presence, and turned its head in his direction. Even in the darkness, Liam could feel the weight of a predatory gaze upon him. Its eyes glowed with a pale, sinister light. A low, menacing growl echoed through the forest, shattering the stillness of the night. Liam knew at that moment he was in danger. The creature before him wasn't something that could be faced with a shotgun. It was something ancient, something that seemed to belong to a world beyond human understanding. Without thinking twice, he raised his weapon but hesitated to fire. There was something in the creature's eyes, something that conveyed not only ferocity but also a strange intelligence, perhaps even suffering. Before he could make a decision, the creature let out another growl and lunged toward him, moving with astonishing speed. Liam knew he had to run to survive. The chase into the dark night had begun. The creature's growl echoed through the frozen forest as it charged, shattering the stillness of the night with a palpable threat. Liam turned and ran, the soft snow slowing his steps, his lungs burning with the effort. The sounds of the pursuit rang behind him, the crunch of snow being torn through, the heavy breathing of the creature, and occasionally, the sharp snap of a branch breaking under its weight. He didn't dare look back, focusing only on dodging the tree trunks and bushes that emerged in his path in the dim light. The shotgun in his hands felt pathetically inadequate against the speed and strength of that thing. Adrenaline surged through his veins, driving him forward, but he knew he couldn't keep up that pace for long. His muscles were already beginning to protest, and the forest seemed endless. He needed to find shelter, a place where he could hide and maybe have a chance to defend himself. His frantic mind desperately searched for a solution, any advantage in that frozen nightmare. He vaguely recalled a small cave Jasper had mentioned, occasionally used by hunters during storms, located some distance west of the cabin. It was his only hope. Veering sharply to the left, Liam tried to change course, hoping to throw the creature off. The forest here was denser, with closer trees and thicker underbrush, making the pursuit harder for both of them. He could still hear the creature behind him, but the sound seemed slightly more distant. Maybe he had managed to gain a few precious seconds. He stumbled over a protruding root, crashing into the snow with a dull thud. Pain shot through his body, but he quickly got back up, knowing he couldn't afford to stop. As he stood, his eyes caught a faint glimmer between the trees. As he drew closer, he saw it was the cave entrance. Small and discreet, hidden behind a curtain of frozen vines. Without hesitation, he squeezed into the narrow opening, crawling into the dark, damp interior. The air inside was cold and heavy with the scent of earth and mold, but it offered a sense of refuge, however fragile. He huddled at the back of the cave, shotgun pointed at the entrance, panting and listening intently. Outside, silence returned, more sinister than before. Liam held his breath, trying to detect any sound that might indicate the creature's presence. For long minutes, there was only the sound of the wind howling outside. He began to allow himself a small sliver of hope that he might have escaped. But then, a dragging sound approached the cave entrance, followed by a low, guttural growl. Much closer now. The creature had found him. A dark shadow blocked the cave's entrance, filling the narrow opening with its menacing form. Pale eyes glowed in the darkness, fixed on Liam. He could feel the creature's hot, fetid breath, the stench of raw flesh and something else, something indescribable and nauseating. The creature tried to force its way through the narrow entrance, its claws scraping against the stone, sending shards flying. Liam knew the tight space of the cave was his only advantage, but how long could he keep it out? Terror gripped him for an instant, but the sight of sharp claws reaching in jolted him back to reality. He had to fight to survive, even if the odds were hopeless. The final confrontation was imminent. The creature struggled to squeeze through the narrow cave entrance, its claws scraping against the damp rock with a chilling sound. Liam backed up as far as he could, the cold, rough wall pressing against his back. The shotgun in his hands trembled slightly, the sense of helplessness washing over him once again. He knew a single shot likely wouldn't be enough to stop that abomination. His mind raced, desperately searching for another means of defense, some vulnerability he could exploit. As the creature forced its way in, part of its body was briefly exposed to the faint light filtering into the cave. Liam noticed something peculiar in its dark fur. In some areas, there were old scars, irregular marks as if it had been in previous fights. And on one of its shoulders, he saw a strange protrusion, almost like a tumor or a malformed bone. A bold idea began to form in his mind, a desperate plan, but perhaps his only chance. With a guttural roar, the creature finally managed to push most of its body through the entrance, only its hind legs still outside. Liam seized the opportunity. Aiming carefully at the protrusion on the creature's shoulder, he fired the shotgun. The deafening blast echoed through the cave, and the creature let out a howl of pain and rage, jerking backward. Liam saw that the shot had hit its mark. Dark blood oozed from the wound. The creature staggered out of the cave, disappearing momentarily into the night's darkness. Liam took the chance to move deeper into the cave, searching for an alternate exit or anything he could use as a weapon. The cave was small, with no visible other openings, but he found several loose stones on the ground. He picked up the largest ones he could carry, feeling the cold, solid weight in his hands bring a fleeting sense of control. He waited in the darkness, breathing fast, the wind outside seeming to carry the creature's furious growls. He knew it would return, wounded and even more dangerous. The minutes dragged on, heavy with tension. Suddenly, a noise at the cave entrance made him jolt. It wasn't the creature's growl this time, but the sound of hesitant footsteps, followed by a weak and familiar voice. "Liam? Are you in there?" It was Jasper's voice. Liam felt a mix of relief and confusion. How had Jasper found him? And what had happened to the creature? Before he could answer, Jasper appeared at the cave entrance, his flashlight casting light into the interior. He looked exhausted and concerned, and in his hands he held something that made Liam's blood run cold again. It was the pendant with the spiral symbol, the one Liam had found in the clearing. "I knew you'd be following the tracks," Jasper said, his voice carrying a dark undertone. "You weren't supposed to get involved in this." What did Jasper know about the creature? And why did he seem more concerned about the pendant than the fact that Liam had just been attacked? The mystery of the forest was far from over, and Jasper's arrival only added a new layer of danger and uncertainty. The light from Jasper's lantern cast dancing shadows on the walls of the small cave, revealing his tense and worried face. The pendant in his hand glowed faintly, seeming to radiate a subtle energy. "This pendant, it belongs to something you don't understand, Liam," Jasper said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "It's a warning, a mark. Finding it means you've been noticed." Jasper's words carried a sinister weight, suggesting that the danger Liam faced was much greater than he could have ever imagined. Liam looked from Jasper to the pendant, confusion and fear mixing inside him. Noticed by who? By the creature. Jasper hesitated for a moment, his gaze shifting. By the Wanderer, and those who serve him. That last phrase echoed in the cave, laden with a dark implication. Servants? Were there others involved? The idea that the creature wasn't alone, that it was part of something bigger and more organized, was terrifying. "Do you know what that thing is?" Liam asked, his voice trembling slightly. Jasper sighed, running a hand over his tired face. "The ancient legends. They speak of beings that dwell deep in the forest, entities tied to the land itself. The Wanderer is one of them, a guardian of certain places, certain secrets. The pendant is a sign of his presence, a warning to keep your distance. But why was the pendant in the clearing? Had it been left intentionally? And the note? Did you leave it?" Jasper nodded. "I saw your tracks leading into the forest. I tried to warn you. You shouldn't have interfered. Now you've put yourself and maybe others in danger." Jasper's tone was accusatory, but there was also a note of genuine fear in his voice. It was as if he knew too much about this mystery and feared the consequences of revealing it. Suddenly, a familiar growl echoed from outside the cave, more furious and closer than before. The creature had returned. Jasper's eyes widened, his hand instinctively reaching for an axe strapped to his belt. "We need to get out of here," he said urgently. "This cave won't protect us for much longer." But where would they go? The night was still dark, and the forest was a maze of unknown dangers. As they prepared to leave the cave, Liam noticed something else in Jasper's eyes, beyond the fear. There was a kind of resignation, almost as if he had faced something like this before and knew that escaping was just a matter of time. "There's an old path," Jasper said, his voice now more firm, "that leads to an abandoned cabin higher up the mountain. It's our only chance." But was the cabin a safe refuge, or just another trap in this nightmare in the forest? And what did Jasper really know about the Wanderer and his servants? The escape into the dark night would be even more dangerous now, with new questions hanging in the air and the threat of the furious creature lurking in the shadows. Jasper led the way out of the cave, the axe in one hand and the lantern in the other, dimly lighting the steep path climbing up the mountainside. Liam followed closely behind, the shotgun still in his hands, his heart pounding in his chest. The snow made the walk slippery and difficult, and the distant sound of the creature's growl served as a constant reminder of the imminent danger. The cold night air seemed to carry a dark omen, and the forest around them whispered unintelligible secrets. "Who are these servants?" Liam asked, his voice broken by effort and fear. Jasper hesitated for a moment, as if considering whether he should answer. "There are those who worship the Wanderer," he finally said, his voice low and tense. "People who live isolated in the forest, who believe in his power, his connection to nature. They protect the sacred places, the secrets of the forest." That revelation cast a new dark light on the events. It wasn't just a wild creature. There was a sect, a cult tied to it. The trail became steeper, winding through moss-covered rocks and twisted trees. Jasper stopped briefly, pointing ahead. "The cabin isn't far," he said, "but we need to be quick. The Wanderer knows this land better than we do." The idea that the creature had territorial intelligence and intimate knowledge of the forest was even more unsettling. They weren't just running from an animal. They were being hunted in its own domain. Finally, they spotted the cabin, a small, dilapidated structure barely visible in the darkness. Jasper quickened his pace, guiding Liam to the creaking door. The interior was in ruins, with broken furniture and cobwebs everywhere, but it offered temporary shelter. Jasper locked the door from the inside with a rusted latch that seemed ready to fall apart. "It won't hold for long," he murmured, inspecting the dusty windows. While Jasper barricaded the windows with pieces of wood found in the cabin, Liam noticed something strange in a dark corner. It was some kind of makeshift altar with stacked stones and small objects carefully arranged on top. Feathers, animal bones, and the same spiral symbol carved into a piece of wood. A chill ran down Liam's spine. That abandoned cabin seemed to be a place of worship for the Wanderer's followers. Suddenly, a loud sound shook the door, followed by a beastly roar. The creature had found them. The latch creaked under the impact, threatening to give way. Jasper gripped his axe tightly, his face pale under the dim lantern light. "Get ready," he said to Liam, his voice tense. "We'll have to fight." But how could they fight against a supernatural creature and its followers in a place that seemed to be a sanctuary for them? The answer to the mystery of the forest was becoming clearer, and it was darker and more dangerous than Liam could have ever imagined. The final confrontation was about to happen, and their chances of survival seemed slimmer with each passing moment. The violent impact against the door made the small cabin tremble, and the rusty latch groaned in protest. Outside, the furious growl of the Wanderer echoed, mingling with other indistinct sounds, like whispers and the rustling of moving branches. Liam gripped the shotgun tighter, watching Jasper wield the axe with grim determination. The makeshift altar in the corner of the cabin seemed to radiate a sinister aura, as if the very structure itself was imbued with dark energy. They were trapped in a place of worship, and the forces pursuing them seemed to be coming together. Other figures began to emerge in the dimness outside, moving silently between the trees. They were human figures, dressed in dark, rustic clothing, their faces hidden by shadows and hoods. Some carried torches, whose flickering flames cast distorted lights over their pale, fixed faces. The Wanderer's servants had arrived. They circled the cabin, watching them with a silent intensity that was even more disturbing than the growls of the creature. The door gave way with a crash, splintering and revealing the imposing figure of the Wanderer in the doorway. His pale eyes gleamed with wild fury, and his sharp claws were exposed. Behind him, the followers advanced, forming a threatening circle around the cabin. Liam realized it wasn't just about surviving the creature. They were trapped in a confrontation with something much larger, a dark force rooted in the very forest. Jasper charged forward, swinging the axe with a shout of defiance. Liam followed closely behind, aiming the shotgun at the Wanderer. The confrontation was brutal and unequal. The Wanderer was fast and strong, his blows charged with supernatural ferocity. The followers lunged at them, their movements strangely coordinated, as if they were under the control of a single mind. The small cabin became a chaotic battleground, with screams, growls, and the sound of breaking would echoing in the night. Amid the chaos, Liam saw Jasper fall, struck by one of the Wanderer's clawed blows. The creature turned toward him, its eyes fixed on Liam with cold hatred. He knew it was the end. But then, as the Wanderer prepared for the final strike, Liam noticed something peculiar in one of the approaching followers. He was carrying a glowing object, an amulet that seemed to emit a faint, pulsating light. It was the same spiral symbol carved on it. Instinctively, remembering the strange vibration he felt when touching the pendant, Liam aimed the shotgun not at the Wanderer, but at the follower with the amulet. He fired. The shot hit the follower in the chest, and the amulet fell to the ground, breaking into pieces. At that moment, the Wanderer staggered backward, letting out a scream of agony. Its form began to shake and twist, as if it were suffering unbearable pain. The other followers stopped, their faces, once fixed, now showing confusion and fear. What had happened? What was the connection between the amulet and the creature? The answer was about to be revealed in a shocking and unexpected way. With the shot and the Wanderer's cry of agony, a tense silence fell over the clearing. The creature staggered, its once imposing form now wavering and unstable. The followers watched in shock, their devotion on their faces replaced by confused terror. Liam looked from the fallen follower, the broken amulet faintly glowing in the snow, to the suffering Wanderer. The connection was undeniable. The amulet somehow held or controlled the creature. Slowly, the transformation began. The Wanderer's dark, rough skin began to retract, revealing a human form underneath. The horns and bony protrusions shrank, the limbs elongated and became thinner. In a matter of seconds, the bestial creature had transformed into a man, pale and thin, kneeling in the snow, groaning in pain. The followers recoiled, whispering unintelligible words in a tone of shock and disbelief. Jasper, stumbling with blood dripping from his arm, looked at the scene with a mix of horror and understanding. "The host," he murmured, his voice weak. "The amulet, it kept him under control." That revelation was shocking. The Wanderer was not a supernatural creature at its core, but rather a man, possessed or transformed by some dark force, kept under control by those amulets. It was the followers, with their rituals and their powerful objects, who perpetuated the terror in the forest. However, the destruction of the amulet had an unexpected side effect. The man who had once been the Wanderer began to writhe again, but this time in a different way. His limbs stretched unnaturally, his bones cracked, and his mouth opened in a silent scream of pure horror. A dark smoke began to emanate from his body, taking the shape of a formless shadow that writhed in the air. The followers screamed in terror, retreating even further. The shadow intensified, growing and becoming more defined, vaguely revealing the silhouette of the creature they feared, but now without the physical form of a human host. It was the very essence of the Wanderer, an entity of pure dark energy that had been imprisoned and controlled through the amulets. Now, freed, its fury was even more intense and uncontrollable. The shadow lunged at the followers, enveloping them in suffocating darkness. Screams of terror echoed through the forest before abruptly falling silent. Liam and Jasper watched in horror, realizing that the destruction of the control had released something even more dangerous. The mystery of the Wanderer had been unraveled, revealing a web of cult, possession, and an ancient dark entity. But the night of terror was not over yet. The real fight for survival had only just begun against a force that could not be hurt by bullets or axes, a shadow hungry for revenge that now hovered free in the dark night of the Canadian forest. What would happen now? No one could predict the horror that was yet to come.